So it says, just try to understand the mighty strength of my Maya in the shape of woman, who, by the mere movement of her eyebrows, can keep even the greatest conquerors of the world under her grip. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. There are many instances in the history of the world of a great conqueror's potency, of a great conqueror's being captivated by the charm of a Cleopatra. One has to study the captivating potency of woman and man's attraction for that potency. From what source was this generated? According to Vedanta Sutra, we can understand that everything is generated from the Supreme Personality of God. It is enunciated there, Janvadasayata. This means that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or the Supreme Person, Brahman, the Absolute Truth, is the source from whom everything emanates. The captivating power of women and man's susceptibility to such attraction must also exist in the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the spiritual world and must be represented in the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. The Lord is the Supreme Person, the Supreme Male. As a common male wants to be attracted by a female, that propensity similarly exists in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He also wants to be attracted by the beautiful features of a woman. Now, the question is, if he wants to be captivated by such womanly attraction, would he be attracted by any material woman? He meaning Krishna. It is not possible. Even persons who are in this material existence can give up womanly attraction if they are attracted by the Supreme Brahman, meaning Krishna. Such was the case with Harivilas Thakur. A beautiful prostitute tried to attract him in the dead of night, but since he was situated in devotional service, in transcendental love of Godhead, Harivilas Thakur was not captivated. Rather, he turned the prostitute into a great devotee by his transcendental association. This material attraction, therefore, certainly cannot attract the Supreme Lord. When he wants to be attracted by a woman, he has to create such a woman from his own energy. That woman is Radharani. It is explained by the Goswamis that Radharani is the manifestation of the pleasure potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the Supreme Lord wants to derive transcendental pleasure, he has to create a woman from his internal potency. Thus, the tendency to be attracted by womanly beauty is natural because it exists in the spiritual world. In the material world, it is reflected pervertedly, and therefore there are so many inebrities, meaning intoxicating things. Instead of being attracted by material beauty, if one is accustomed to be attracted by the beauty of Radharani and Krishna, Then the statement of Bhagavad Gita, Param Drishtva Nivartate, holds true. In other words, Param Drishtva Nivartate means you have a superior taste. When one is attracted by the transcendental beauty of Radha and Krishna, he is no longer, meaning the ordinary living being, is no longer attracted by material feminine beauty. That is the special significance of Radha Krishna worship. That is testified by to by Yamunacharya. He says, since I have been attracted by the beauty of Radha and Krishna, when there is attraction for a woman or a memory of sex life with a woman, I at once spit on it and my face turns in disgust. When we are attracted by Madan Mohana and the beauty of Krishna and his consorts, then the shackles of conditioned life, namely the beauty of a material woman, cannot attract us. Okay, very good statement. I at once spit on it, and my face turns in disgust. Okay, so in other words, it says, when there is attraction for a woman or a memory of sex life with a woman, I at once spit on it, and my face turns in disgust. Well, I wonder how many people actually feel like that. We actually have very highly educated and person dedicated to Krishna to feel like that. But without feeling like that, people become attracted by very false qualities of a very attractive woman, and it can actually ruin their life. Text number 39. One who aspires to reach the culmination of yoga and has realized his self by rendering service unto me should never associate with an attractive woman, for such a woman is declared in the scripture to be the gateway to hell for the advancing devotee. Wow. Okay, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The culmination of yoga is full Krishna consciousness. This is affirmed in Bhagavad Gita. A person who is always thinking of Krishna in devotion is the topmost of all yogis. And in the second chapter of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is also stated that when one becomes freed from material contamination by rendering devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can at that time understand the science of God. Here, the word pratil datma labha occurs. Atma means self, and labha means gain. Generally, conditioned souls have lost their Atma or self, but those who are transcendentalists have realized the self. It is directed that such a self-realized soul who aspires to the topmost platform of yogic perfection should not associate with young women. In the modern age, however, there are so many rascals who recommend that while one has genitals, he should enjoy women as much as he likes. And at the same time, he can become a yogi. In
like Osho kind of.
huh?
Osho, Rajneesh.
Yeah, Rajneesh, all those nonsense people. In no standard yoga system is the association of women accepted. It is clearly stated here that the association of women is the gateway to hellish life. The association of women is very much restricted in the Vedic civilization. Out of the four social divisions, the brahmachari, vanaprastha, and the sannyasi, three orders, are strictly prohibited from the association of women. Only the grihastas or householders are given license to have an intimate relationship with a woman. And that relationship is also restricted for begetting nice children. If, however, one wants to stick to conditioned existence in the material world, he may indulge in female association unrestrictedly. Well, that female association that's unrestricted, that begins right from uh, school, where you have co-ed education, boys and girls mixed together in the same classroom, and also uh, boys and girls uh, sometimes uh, using the same um, a urinal or same uh, um, uh, the same places of uh, what you would call uh, yeah, I mean, there are places that have these bathrooms. There are co-ed bathrooms. There are schools, sometimes colleges also that have co-ed bathrooms. Where they got this idea from, I don't know. But it is happening now. So you can walk into a bathroom, the co-ed bathroom, and there's a woman there, and a man walks in there, and it's very shocking for the woman. But there are places where they have these co-ed bathrooms, and that idea, whoever has that idea to do that is an insane person. Okay, so uh, if, however, one wants to stick to continued existence in the material world, he may indulge in female association unrestrictedly. So, the more those cultures in which the relationship with women is restricted is more peaceful and and more happy in many ways. But the first point is co-ed education, where boys and girls are in the same classroom all day long. That's not a good idea. Uh, I know many Catholic schools have separate, uh, let's say, education. Uh, yeah, when I went to, I think, yeah, when I was in Central High School, uh, it was not a co-ed school. It was a boys' school. Not far away was a girls' school, but there was no mingling of boys and girls during school time. However, over time, that whole idea of separation of boys and girls in school has become watered down, and now most schools are co-ed schools. They still have some schools that separate the boys from the girls, but most schools are not like that. Public schools are not like that anymore. When I went to school, though, and it was Central High School, there was no mixing of girls and boys. At Central High School, you had to have a very high IQ and very high grades to get into that school, and it was all boys. And there were other schools that were just all girls, but they did not mix together. I don't know if it's still like that now. Okay, text number 40. The woman created by the Lord is the representation of Maya, and one who associates with such Maya by accepting services must certainly know that this is the way of death, just like a blind well covered with grass. Well, a blind well covered with grass, you unwittingly can step into it and fall down deeply into the well. Mm-hmm. So, in the same way, when someone becomes attracted to the uh, different bodily qualities of a woman, it's like stepping into a blind well covered with grass. You don't realize how deep you can fall into Maya. Sometimes it happens that a rejected well is covered by grass, and an unwary traveler who does not know of the existence of the well falls down, and his death is assured. Similarly, association with a woman begins when one accepts service from her, because woman is especially created by the Lord to give service to man. By accepting her service, a man is entrapped if he is not intelligent enough to know that she is the gateway to hellish life. He may indulge in her association very liberally. This is restricted for those who aspire to ascend to the transcendental platform. Even 50 years ago in Hindu society, such association was restricted. A wife could not see her husband during the daytime. Householders even had different residential quarters. The internal quarters of a residential house were for the women, and the external quarters were for the men. Were for the man. Acceptance of service rendered by women may appear very pleasing, but one should be very cautious in accepting such service, because it is clearly said that woman is the gateway to death or forgetfulness of oneself. She blocks the path of spiritual realization. Well, Prabhupada doesn't mince his words or his statements. He's telling the truth. So, the main statement here is that association with a woman begins when one accepts service from her, because woman is especially created by the Lord to give service to man. By accepting her service, a man is entrapped. If he is not intelligent enough to know that she is the gateway to hellish life, he may indulge in her association very liberally. This is restricted for those who aspire to ascend to the transcendental platform. Even 50 years ago, and now you could probably say 100 years ago, as Prabhupada is speaking from at least 50, 60 years ago. Even 50 years ago, in Hindu society, such association was restricted. A wife could not see her husband during the daytime. Householders even had different residential quarters. The internal quarters of a residential house were for the women, and the external quarters were for the men. Acceptance of service rendered by a woman may appear very pleasing, but one should be very cautious in accepting such service because it is clearly said that woman is the gateway to death or forgetfulness of oneself. She blocks the path of spiritual realization. Okay, so now, this is these are correct statements. It might be difficult for most women and for some men to hear statements like this. But these are true statements. Prabhupada is not, let's say Bhagavatam is not hiding anything. It's in the Bhagavatam, you're receiving the genuine truth of what is the relationship between men and women. So, when we read that an unwary traveler who does not know of the existence of the well falls down, and his death is assured. Similarly, associate with a woman begins when one accepts service from her, because woman is especially created by the Lord to give service to man. By accepting her service, a man is entrapped. If he is not intelligent enough to know that she is the gateway to hellish life, he may indulge in her association very liberally. This is restricted for those who aspire to ascend to the transcendental platform. So everything now is going to depend on how you see someone. So if you see, if for men, if the men see all women except his wife as his mother, and that way he does not lust over women because he sees all women like his mother. And women should see all men except her husband as her her mother, her father. So the idea that there's unrestricted mixture of men and women and co-ed education and free access of, let's say men and women, like let's say from 12 years old, the parents permit the boys and girls to associate with each other, go to parties, things like that. Well, you're just asking for trouble. But the main statement here is that association with the woman begins when one accepts service from her, because woman is especially created by the Lord to give service to man. By accepting her service, a man is entrapped. If he is not intelligent enough to know that she is the gateway to hellish life, he may indulge in her association very liberally. This is restricted for those who aspire to ascend to the transcendental platform. Even 50 years ago in Hindu society, such association was restricted. A wife could not see her husband during the daytime. Householders even had different residential quarters. The internal quarters of a residential house were for the women, and the external quarters were for the men. Was for the man. Acceptance of service rendered by a woman may appear very pleasing, but one should be very cautious in accepting such service because it is clearly said that woman is the gateway to death or forgetfulness of oneself. She blocks the path of spiritual realization. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Yeah.
Text 41. A living entity who, as a result of attachment to a woman in his previous life, has been endowed with the form of a woman. In other words, someone who's very attached to women, and their next life, they can become a woman. Foolishly looks upon Maya in the form of a man, her husband, as the bestower of wealth, progeny, house, and other material assets. From this verse, it appears that a woman is also supposed to have been a man in his or her previous life. And due to his attachment to his wife, he now has the body of a woman. Bhagavad Gita confirms this. A man gets his next life's birth, according to what he thinks of at the time of death. If someone is too attached to his wife, naturally he thinks of his wife at the time of death. And in his next life, he takes the body of a woman. Similarly, if a woman thinks of her husband at the time of death, naturally she gets the body of a man in the next life. In the Hindu scriptures, therefore, women's chastity and devotion to man is greatly emphasized. A woman's attachment to her husband may elevate her to the body of a man in her next life, but a man's attachment to a woman will degrade him. And in his next life, he will get the body of a woman. We should always remember, as it is stated in Bhagavad Gita, that both the gross and subtle material bodies are dresses. They are the shirt and coat of the living entity. To be either a woman or a man only involves one's bodily dress. The soul in nature is actually the marginal energy of the Supreme Lord. Every living entity being classified as energy is supposed to be originally a woman or one who is enjoyed. In the body of a man, there is a greater opportunity to get out of material clutches. There is less opportunity in the body of a woman. In this verse, it is indicated that the body of a man should not be misused through forming an attachment to women and thus becoming too entangled in material enjoyment, which will result in getting the body of a woman in the next life. A woman is generally fond of household prosperity, ornaments, furniture, and dresses. She is satisfied when the husband supplies all these things sufficiently. The relationship between man and woman is very complicated, but the substance is that one who aspires to ascend to the transcendental stage of spiritual realization should be very careful in accepting the association of a woman. In the stage of Krishna consciousness, however, such restriction of association may be slackened because if a man's and woman's attachment is not to each other but to Krishna, then both of them are equally eligible to get out of the material entanglement and reach the abode of Krishna. As it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, anyone who seriously takes to Krishna consciousness, whether in the lowest species of life, or a woman, or the less intelligent classes, such as the mercantile or labor class, will go back home, back to Godhead, and reach the abode of Krishna. Let me read that again. As it is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, anyone who seriously takes the Krishna consciousness, whether in the lowest species of life or a woman or of the less intelligent classes, such as the mercantile or laborer class, will go back home, back to Godhead, and reach the abode of Krishna. A man should not be should not be attached to a woman, nor should a woman be attached to a man. Both man and woman should be attached to the service of the Lord. Then there is the possibility of liberation from material entanglement for both of them. Very, very important statements here by Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada is not saying that a man should never see a woman or a woman should never see a man. But he's saying that even in marriage, there should be some separation of association of man and woman, even in married life. So the oftentimes you see that people, like men and women that are married, they sleep in the same bed or they sleep in the same bedroom. That's not recommended. That's why it says here that let's see, maybe we can accept this. Normally, in Krishna consciousness, men and women do not sleep in the same bed, and oftentimes not even in the same room. Why is that? Well, it's to not be enticed by the desire for sense gratification, even in marriage. Where does it say that? In the stage of Krishna consciousness, however, such restriction of association may be slackened, because if a man's and woman's attachment is not to each other but to Krishna, then both of them are equally eligible to get out of the material entanglement and reach the abode of Krishna. As it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, anyone who seriously takes the Krishna consciousness, whether in the lowest species of life or a woman or of the less intelligent classes, such as the mercantile or laborer class, will go back home, back to Godhead, and reach the abode of Krishna. A man should not be attached to a woman, nor should a woman be attached to a man. Both man and woman should be attached to the service of the Lord. Then there is possibility of liberation from material entanglement for both of them. Okay, so if you never read this, then it's almost impossible to practice this type of willingly having separation, even in marriage. And Prabhupada says here, and that's true, it's factual, the relationship between man and woman is very complicated. But the substance is that one who aspires to ascend to the transcendental stage of spiritualization should be very careful in accepting the association of a woman. In the stage, so it's the same thing for women. In the stage of Krishna consciousness, however, such restriction of association may be slackened, because if a man's and women's attachment is not to each other, but to Krishna, then both of them are equally eligible to get out of the material entanglement and reach the abode of Krishna. As it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, anyone who seriously takes the Krishna consciousness, whether in the lowest species of life or a woman or of the less intelligent classes, such as the mercantile or laborer class, meaning the men, will go back home, back to Godhead, and reach the abode of Krishna. A man should not be attached to a woman, nor should a woman be attached to a man. Both man and woman should be attached to the service of the Lord. Then there is possibility of liberation from material entanglement for both of them. Well, this is not taught in schools. I never heard anything like that when I was in school.
So another way to probably understand this, Maharaj, is like, obviously the world, there is concept of feminists like who are trying to equate women to the, that they're equally capable of men, which they are because on the spiritual platform. So only when they are on the path of devotion in the spiritual platform, there is equality. But in a material realm, you cannot equate because obviously the capabilities, the roles and the responsibilities of men and women are different. So if
Doesn't sound like good chanting.
So the point is like, the world is trying to get to an equality platform, right? Because that's what equal rights for all people. But the equality comes only when we elevate to the spiritual platform. That means like everybody should try to become a devotee. Then we all have the equal opportunity, because otherwise a man becomes a woman if they're attracted, which is considered actually as a degradation, at least on the material platform, right? According to the, and then similarly, so there are some classes, there is some, I don't know why Shastra does see it that way, but it is the certain distinction between different, genders or different capabilities of men also.
Yeah, but here Prabhupada says, that if a man's and woman's attachment is not to each other, but to Krishna, then both of them are equally eligible to get out of the material entanglement and reach the abode of Krishna. As it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, anyone who seriously takes the Krishna consciousness, whether in the lowest species of life or a woman or of the less intelligent classes, such as the mercantile or laborer class, will go back home, back to Godhead, and reach the abode of Krishna. A man should not be attached to a woman, nor should a woman be attached to a man. Both man and woman should be attached to the service of the Lord. Then there is possibility of liberation from material entanglement for both of them. So that should be our takeaway, that as long as the man and woman are attached to the service of the Lord, then there's the possibility of liberation from material entanglement for both of them. So simply having a mundane life with no serious practice of Krishna consciousness, then the position of the men and women is very, let's say, dangerous, because they can be falsely attached and think of each other at the moment of death and stay again in the process of birth, death, old age, and disease. So association with women is not forbidden in Krishna consciousness, but inappropriate behavior between men and women is prohibited in Krishna consciousness. So, learning to control the mind and the senses is very important. We have the history of Ajamil. When he was still a young boy, maybe around 16 years old, he saw a low-class man and a low-class woman having sex in the forest. And after seeing that, it affected his consciousness or contaminated his consciousness. And from that point on, he became addicted to sense gratification and women and having sex. Now, fast forward till today. When the history of Ajamil, it was a rare, let's say, encounter in those days between men and women. They were separated. So it was a rare thing that Hajimil saw a man and woman having sex, and it contaminated his mind. And then the rest of his life, he engaged in sense gratification with women. Today, the loose relationship of men and women is glorified in movies, in books, and in all different ways. And women are encouraged to wear, uh, provocative clothing and perfume and makeup and all things like that. So today, and the association of men and women is not understood correctly. And therefore, there's a lot of fall downs, even beginning in the mostly in teenage life, instead of maintaining a life of celibacy. Many boys and girls lose their virginity due to the easy association or open association between boys and girls. So, that's why Prabhupada says the relationship between man and woman is very complicated. But the substance is that one who aspires to ascend to the transcendental stage of spiritual realization should be very careful in accepting the association of a woman. In the stage of Krishna consciousness, however, such restriction of association may be slackened because of a man's and woman's attachment is not to each other, but to Krishna. Then both of them are equally eligible to get out of the material entanglement and reach the abode of Krishna, as it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Anyone who seriously takes to Krishna consciousness, whether in the lowest species of life, or a woman, or of the less intelligent classes, such as the mercantile or laborer class, will go back home, back to Godhead, and reach the abode of Krishna. A man should not be attached to a woman, nor should a woman be attached to a man, but both man and woman should be attached to the service of the Lord. Then there's possibility of liberation from material entanglement for both of them. Well, today there's a lot of infidelity going on between men and women. And you hear about it. And sometimes when a man learns that his wife is engaging in illicit sex with another man, he kills his wife. And sometimes when the woman finds out that her husband is engaging in illicit sex with another woman, she tries to kill her husband. It's It's happening all the time. And nowadays, there's very easy divorce. In previous time, it was difficult to have a divorce. I mean, it was possible, but it was more complicated. Now, it's very easy to have a divorce. Uh, and therefore, there's chaos in society basically because of that. The sanctity of marriage should be supported in all circumstances. And divorce should be a difficult concept or difficult process. Uh, every effort should be to inspire the couple to stay together. And because of their sacred vow of celibacy in their marriage. I mean, in other words, they will have sex to have children, but they will not engage in sex outside of marriage. And they make that promise when they get married. However, it says the relationship between man and woman is very complicated, but the substance is that one who aspires to ascend to the transcendental stage of spiritual realization should be very careful in accepting the association of a woman. In the stage of Krishna consciousness, however, such restriction of association may be slackened because if a man's and woman's attachment is not to each other, but to Krishna, then both of them are equally eligible to get out of the material entanglement and reach the abode of Krishna. As it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, anyone who seriously takes to Krishna consciousness, whether in the lowest species of life or a woman or of the less intelligent classes, such as the mercantile or laborer class, will go back home, back to Godhead, and reach the abode of Krishna. A man should not be attached to a woman, nor should a woman be attached to a man. Both man and woman should be attached to the service of the Lord. Then there is possibility of liberation from material entanglement for both of them. Thank you, Prabhupada, for a well balanced statement of the proper way for men and women to associate with each other. Yeah, Prabhupada was married. He had 5 children. And he did, after he got married, he did tell his father, he said, Dad, I want to get another wife. I don't like the wife that I have. And Prabhupada's father said, don't do it. And said, I'm not recommending this. And Prabhupada listened to his father. But he did say, I didn't really like my wife. But they did have 5 kids. And he did stay, let's say, dedicated to his wife. But he was not really enamored by her, especially because she liked to drink coffee or tea. And she had some habits that he didn't like. Although she was a good woman, she was not, a sinful person. But she had a few little foibles or few weaknesses, like drinking tea. So actually, when when Prabhupada spoke to his father, he said, "Look, I don't like my wife. I want to get another wife." His father told him, "No, don't do it." That was the best advice. That way, Prabhupada, it was a good thing that he wasn't attached to his wife. And although he still had 5 children, and he never rejected his wife, but he was not, let's say, overwhelmingly attached to her. And when the right time came, he took sannyas and ended the attachment completely. Okay, now are there any questions? We are reading. I have to admit that almost 3/4 of the Srimad Bhagavatam is dealing with man-woman relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you can understand just by the numbers that understanding the man-woman relationship is very important in order to have a good spiritual life. It's not that we artificially reject men and women associating with each other, but it is highly recommended to be limited in the type of association one may have between a man and woman, even in marriage. That's why it says, the Prabhupada says, the relationship between man and woman is very complicated, but the substance is that one who aspires to ascend to the transcendental stage of spiritual realization should be very careful in accepting the association of a woman. In the stage of Krishna consciousness, however, such restriction of association may be slackened, because if a man's and woman's attachment is not to each other, but to Krishna, then both of them are equally eligible to get out of the material entanglement and reach the abode of Krishna. As it is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, anyone who seriously takes to Krishna consciousness, whether in the lowest species of life or a woman or of the less intelligent classes, such as the mercantile or laborer class, will go back home, back to Godhead, and reach the abode of Krishna. A man should not be attached to a woman, nor should a woman be attached to a man. Both man and woman should be attached to the service of the Lord. Then there is the possibility of liberation from material entanglement for both of them. Okay, so it is possible to have a life of marriage as long as the husband and wife are not attached to each other in the form of mundane sex, but they should be mutually attached to Krishna by engagement in devotional service. So now man and woman can have a proper relationship when they are both interested in Krishna consciousness and not interested in their own sense gratification. Okay, so now it's a little bit late. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask?
Any questions online?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I do have a question on the verse 331:44. I was rereading this after you explained. My question is, the translation says that in this way, the living entity gets a suitable body with the material mind and senses according to his fruitive activities. When the reaction of his particular activity comes to an end, that end is called death. And when a particular type of reaction begins, that beginning is called birth. So my question is, what does it mean by when the reaction of this particular activity comes to an end? Are we supposed to understand that would be the old age and disease? I was just curious about what exactly it means by particular activity comes to an end, Maharaj.
Okay, well, if I'm not mistaken, if I understand your question correctly, that the separation of man and woman should be maintained throughout life, even when they're married. There should be, a proper lifestyle of separation, like, not sleeping in the same bed at night, and oftentimes the sleeping in the same bed is not good, or sleeping in the same room is not good. So the even in married life, there should be separation between man and woman. But the separation should not be something that's fanatical. It should be done with knowledge, understanding the weaknesses, or understanding the example of heat and butter. When butter comes close to a source of heat, it melts. So in the same way, the association to men and women should be done with proper, let's say, separation, or respectful separation. And no wife likes a husband is always trying to force sex in the relationship, or vice versa. The man doesn't like the wife that's always forcing him to have sex. So sex is only meant for procreation. So when sex is forced for pleasure, it becomes unpleasant to either the wife or the husband. So it takes time for people to be trained before they get married into how to have a let's say a constructive marriage, or a enlightened marriage. These things have to be taught before a boy and girl get married. But if they are never really trained, then they'll go through many different situations that leads to, rather than marriage, leads to divorce. When one or both are very lusty and cannot control their desires for sex. Sex is only meant for procreation of children. It's not meant for so-called pleasure, but actually it's not really pleasure. And sex, where two bodies connect to each other, that means you're basically just connecting your germs to each other. And it becomes a precarious type of life, because we have talked about this recently, that kissing is not something that is recommended, because the mouth is as contaminated as the anus, and when two people are kissing each other, they're just giving each other more germs, and it can also lead to bad health. So none of these things are openly explained in schools, and then people make many mistakes, and it impacts their health as well as their relationships.
So I think Mataji, you're referring to the verse 44. Is that what you refer?
Yes, Prabhu. The 331:44 is where.
Are you reading ahead, because we are still in the 39?
39. Okay. So I think I'm sorry about it. I got confused.
All right, that's all right. I'm looking at verse 44 now. Go ahead.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
is your
I'm
question?
sorry, Maharaj. For
That's all
some
right.
reason, I got mixed up. So yes, 44 is the one that I was reading yesterday, and that's where my question was. The second sentence says, when the reaction of his particular activity comes to an end, that end is called death. And when a particular type of reaction begins, that beginning is called birth. So I was trying to understand what does it mean by when the reaction of this particular activity comes to an end. Does it mean that is it the old age or disease, that activity or that part of our body change is what is referred here?
Well, when it says, okay, in this way, the living entity gets a suitable body with a material mind and senses, according to his fruitive activities. When the reaction of his particular activity comes to an end, that end is called death. And when a particular type of reaction begins, that beginning is called birth. So this is what you're talking about, right? This is the
Yes, Maharaj.
yes. Okay, well, let's look at the purport a little bit more carefully. It says, from time immemorial, the living entity travels in different species of life and different planets, almost perpetually. I mean, almost forever. This process is explained in Bhagavad Gita, Brahmayan Sarvabhutani Yantarudrani Maya. Under the spell of Maya, everyone is wandering through the universe in the carriage of the body offered by the material energy. Materialistic life involves a series of actions and reactions. It is a long film spool of actions and reactions, and one lifespan is just a flash in such a reactionary show. When a child is born, it is to be understood that his particular type of body is the beginning of another set of activities. And when an old man dies, it is to be understood that one set of reactionary activities is finished. We can see that because of different reactionary activities, one man is born in a rich family and another is born in a poor family, although both of them are born in the same place, at the same moment, and in the same atmosphere. One who is carrying pious activity with him is given a chance to take his birth in a rich or pious family, and one who is carrying impious activity is given a chance to a different field of activities. Similarly, when the body of the boy changes into that of a youth, the boyish activities change into youthful activities. It is clear that the particular body is given to the living entity for a particular type of activity. This process is going on perpetually from a time which is impossible to trace out. Vaishnava poets say, therefore, anadi karma phale, which means that these actions and reactions of one's activity cannot be traced, for they may even continue from the last millennium of Brahma's birth to the next millennium. We have seen the example in the life of Narada Muni. In one millennium, he was the son of a maidservant, and in the next millennium, he became a great sage. Okay, so what is this saying exactly? It means that we have eternal life. You can never really be killed, but you can go through a tremendous number of times of being in the material world, in a material body, and suffering, whether it's in the body of an animal or whether it's in the body of a human being. So therefore, without becoming Krishna conscious, there's no way of stopping this process of birth, death, old age, and disease in many different species of life. If we understand this, then in this life where we have the human body and human intelligence, we actually make an effort to stop this merry-go-round of birth, death, old age, and disease, and by becoming Krishna conscious. But if we don't understand this, then we're caught in this cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, and we're no better than an animal. And we waste the human form of life just in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And we go back to being an animal in the next life and caught in the cycle of birth and death. So we should always think like this. I have passed so many lifetimes in all the different species of possible of life. Now I am fortunate enough to have the human form of life. I'm going to use this one lifetime only in the service of Krishna, because I've spent many lifetimes forgetting Krishna and going up and down in the cycle of birth and death in different forms of bodies. So in this one lifetime, I'm going to be completely dedicated to serving Krishna and breaking this vicious cycle of birth and death. We should come to this conclusion. This is what is being emphasized by the Vedic knowledge. We haven't had just one life. And when we die, it's not the end of everything. That means that, and there are 8,400,000 species of life. That means that as long as we're not Krishna conscious, we will travel up and down in all these different species of life. But when we get to the human form of life, that is very exceptional birth. And it's meant for developing love for Krishna and being educated properly so that our whole life is based on serving Krishna. Then we can break the cycle of birth and death and go back to the spiritual world. So the human form of life should be explained. The importance of the human form of life should be explained to children and to the teenagers and to adults. So they do not act like animals, just eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. They should use the body, the mind, the intelligence to become Krishna conscious. They can't do it in the body of an animal, and they can't do it in the body of a lusty man or a lusty woman. They can only do it in the body of a human being who has understood the cycle of birth and death and how they've gone through that cycle for many, many different lifetimes. But now they're in the fortunate body of a conscious human being. Therefore, they should use this great blessing to only engage in the service of Krishna and be liberated from that vicious cycle that they've gone through for many lifetimes. That's called spiritual knowledge. Without spiritual knowledge, we just remain in the grip of Maya and go up and down in the different types of bodies and suffer. Everybody, every time you get a body, material body, you suffer. Doesn't matter if it's a human being or an animal. And that suffering is a message. It should be a message to us that we should do everything possible to get out of this cycle of birth and death, because the cycle of birth and death always is miserable. So how to get away of that, get out of that cycle? Well, only a person as a human body can do it. The animals can't do it. The trees, the insects, they can't do it. So having a human body is a very special benediction. And you've achieved that type of body as a human being after going through all the 8,400,000 species. So therefore, it's a rare thing to have a human body, and therefore we should only use the human body in the service of Krishna, which is the only way we can get free of the cycle of birth and death. So we have to be taught, this has to be taught to children. They have to understand how rare it is to be an enlightened human being who avoids the sources of or the tricks of Maya and engages wholeheartedly in devotional service because they've already gone through many different bodies, many different concepts, and now they've come to the human body and they're born in a good family that helps them to understand what is the reality of life. And that reality of life is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. As we're reading it, we're understanding that we're not meant to stay in this body in the material world. And there's no way that you can make the material body eternal. That's what crazy people are doing, trying to make the material body eternal. So, because death is unavoidable, therefore, if we have a human body, we should use it only in the service of Krishna. Therefore, you have to understand it in this way that, first of all, it's a rare thing to have a human body. One. Number two, it's only when you have a human body that you can free yourself from the cycle of birth and death. And three, that the real purpose of life is to free yourself from birth and death and go back to the spiritual world where you have an eternal body and living in the association of pure devotees. So the way to develop that eternal spiritual body is to associate with genuine devotees in this lifetime. That should be our understanding. We've already gone through all the different species. We've already had birth and death many, many times. We've always already had many, many families. But in this one, let's say, birth, where we have human intelligence, we should understand that the real purpose of the human body is to get out of the cycle of birth and death by devotional service to the Lord and by constantly keeping our consciousness purified by engaging in Krishna consciousness and regularly hearing the Shastras and also and not only reading not only hearing but also preaching the doctrine of Krishna consciousness, so that our whole life now is spent connected to Krishna, and therefore we are trained to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. And at the moment of death, we will be able to remember Krishna and go back to Godhead.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, it's 7:50, so we'll on a Monday. So any other questions? If not, we'll wrap the session for today, for this morning.
Okay, so be careful. There's a lot of snow outside. And I don't know what the roads are like. I guess they've cleared the roads, maybe, but not, in the neighborhoods. So you have to still be very careful.
Schools are also 2 hours late start.
Okay. I wouldn't go to school on a day like this. Haribol, thank you very much, my dear devotees. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Chant Hare Krishna and be happy.